welcome everyone. Welcome back and welcome and thank you for joining us for another WSWA Access Craft Wine and Spirits webinar. Today we're going to be covering what's needed to build your brand and business portfolio with a focus on new business principles and best practices that evolve in a post-COVID marketplace. Information shared today by a panel of experts is intended to provide craft, startup, and small production wine and spirits with the best practices, firsthand experience, and data that when combined and applied can give your brand the best chance to succeed in a competitive U.S. marketplace. However, today's webinar is of interest to every industry professional trying to navigate the wine spirits marketplace. It definitely looks a lot different than it did just a few years ago, and this year is a minefield of unknowns. But after today's webinar, hopefully able to navigate that with a little more care and attention. Before we introduce the panel of experts and get started, several craft startup brands have contacted us asking about the next WSWA Brand Battle Tournament. The next WSWA Brand Battle Tournament will be held at WSWA's Reimagining Convention in 2023. So for the latest information on all WSWA in-person events, be sure to follow us on Twitter at WSWA-Media. Additionally, Access Craft Wine and Spirits program today will be, we will be recording, and a recording of this webinar will be provided to you afterwards. And before we get started, last but certainly not least, I want to recognize and congratulate everyone in the WSWA Access Craft Wine Spirits program for 2022. We would like to recognize the wholesaler advisors and the brand reps that make up this program. These are very talented and dedicated professionals who are laser focused on keeping the U.S. marketplace the most diverse, competitive, and consumer-centric in the world. Let's get right to our panel. So today's panel is definitely one that I'm excited to speak with. I know they're excited to share some of their insights with you. We have industry veterans with us, without a doubt. We have John Bolello, CEO of Sweet Amber Distilling and Blackened American Whiskey. We have Sarah Harmelin back, Vice President, Digital Innovation with Allied Beverage Group. We have Monique Houston, who is a new member, advisory council member to the Access program, and Vice President of Wholesale Spirits with Winebow. And we have, once again, joining us, our trusted analyst, Dale Stratton, SipSource analyst, industry veteran, and just all around good guy when it comes to these webinars. So let's get started. Again, a lot has changed in the industry. I think that's pretty obvious to everyone. And so what we want to talk about is how should brands engage with distributors and retail partners, because it's a different environment. So let's start with the state of on and off premise activities with the data telling us about different categories and their movement in this space. Dale, why don't you go ahead and set up the presentation and discussion today with some data.
Thank you very much, Michael, and thank you for including me in this webinar. This is absolutely a hot topic and something that's very, very important for all of those who are trying to build their brands in the marketplace. Going to the next slide, please. I think it's really important when we start thinking about how COVID has unfolded, and some of you have seen this, but breaking into distinct periods, because the pandemic has driven very, very different behavior from the consumer based on a lot of reasons as we've gone through the last 2 years. And the data we have here, the latest data we have is through February, which gives us exactly 2 years. Our base point of starting there on the left-hand side, and all I'm looking at here is for the total of wine and spirits combined, is the split between on-premise and off-premise. And at the start of the pandemic, it was on-premise accounted for 15.8%, where we had 84.2% in the retail side of things. When we went into that shutdown and shelter in place, the 4 months between March and June of 2020, on-premise only accounted for 5%, just under 5% of all volume. And severe change, we know that. And we saw it inch up in the back half of July 2020. It got to 8% of the business. In the back half of 2021, that's 6 months. And I try and break this into smaller periods so that we're not seeing a whole lot of old data influence. We saw that total went up to 13.6. And we've been hovering around that area kind of as we've gone through this. And we've looked at it in the latest 4 months, and I like to use 4 months because we're able to get November, December, January, February in there. The on-premise is accounting for 13.1% of all volume. So we've seen that stagnate a little bit, and we've seen where the on-premise isn't necessarily gaining more share. Some consumer habits have changed. And also I would say that the battle for that independent operator, the on-premise operator, it's still tough out there. Commodity prices are increasing, labor prices are increasing. There's just a lot of pressures on that business. So we're seeing that stagnate at about 13%. So we're just not getting back on a share point from where we were previous to the pandemic. And I think that drives a lot of the actions that all of us need to think about and how we approach our business going forward.
Dale, thanks for that. And I think now we have a better understanding of the current state of the marketplace. So now let's talk about how brands should engage with wholesaler partners as well as our retail partners. And we're going to first go to John Bolello, who's going to share with us what you should be doing to maximize your engagement, your sales efforts. And John is an industry veteran, again, currently leading Sweet Amber Distilling with Black and American Whiskey. John, what's your take on this? How do we maximize our efforts and engagement?
Thanks, Michael. So as Dale just showed us, the on-premise is approaching pre-pandemic levels, and the off-premise continues to hold strong, which means there are opportunities for craft brands in both the on-premise and off-premise channels. Importantly, we're also seeing many of the distributors are again taking meetings in person, and more importantly, allowing ride-withs with their salespeople, which allows craft brand suppliers to educate both their distributor personnel and retailers directly about their brand and category. You know, it's been 2 years that we've been kind of shut out, so to speak. And I can't tell you how many of my team have been riding with distributor salespeople, and that they've been hearing from them, you know, we're glad you're back. You know, we started New Jersey, Sarah's distributors one. We started with Allied during the pandemic. So our team has never interacted directly with that sales force, and it's really working well for us. With Blacken, we're doing all of the above. But in addition, we've started running sales blitzes where we're sending multiple Blacken reps into the market to blitz both on and off premise, riding with our distributor salespeople partners, and it's offered us really great results. We sell in new points of distribution. We're booking tastings in the off premise. We put up point of sale, secure displays, and we're applicable. We're even trying to book on premise activations too. Michael?
Yeah, John, thanks for sharing that. Really interesting, a lot of activity, and I think you're reaping some of those benefits. Very encouraging. Monique, give us your perspective as a distributor. You have a lot of experience in the industry, specifically on premise. What's your take on all of this?
Thanks, Michael, and thanks for having me. John, I love it. You're so positive, and I love all those things. And I don't want to be Debbie Downer, but man, do we still have challenges. So we're so excited to get back. And I come from an on-premise background, so it warms my heart to continue to see these numbers rise. But we've still got so many changes in terms of keeping up with buyers. Where have people gone? Massive labor shortages. So, and different in every market, and it changes every day. So just, being really dynamic, trying to stay on top of it. And a lot of people making moves, so people that have gone from maybe, bar backing to bartending to managing, which managing also means that they're the janitor and maybe they're waiting tables. And so, still challenges to getting meetings and getting share of mind. And I think too, we all know about all the difficulties we're having throughout the supply chain, probably not letting up anytime soon. So, one of the biggest challenges that we've seen is as we are able to get back and engage in the on-premise, is messaging, things like timelines and price, changes and, fuel surcharges. And then also having kind of a ready-made, I guess, kind of spate of what we can offer for all the things that are just out of stock or have temporary out of stocks or delays. And I think, John, to your point, where that really makes sense, maybe for some of the competitive sets, is keeping on top of market by market, what's out of stock and what maybe you have that can fill in, what the pricing looks like on it, and changes that you have to make, maybe the cocktail recipes or whatever it is, but just being there to kind of hear everybody out. Yes, we're all in the same boat with a lot of these challenges, but to be really solution oriented, patient, because it's not going anywhere anytime soon.
Yeah, Monique, I think you give a really good perspective, providing solutions, being a good partner. And I think if you help your on-premise partners circumnavigate what's going on currently, I think you'll earn their trust in business for hopefully years to come. Sarah, what's your perspective as a distributor working with brands like Black and American Whiskey and a host of others? What are we seeing from maximizing our sales efforts and engagement of the on-premise?
I feel like it's on-premise, off-premise. The biggest tool that has changed, that has grown in the past few years, is something that was there all along, just evolved. So I say embrace all those tools you can. The digital tools also tend to be very budget friendly for those suppliers that are just starting out or maybe don't have the financing they're still looking for. So get your assets in order. Share those with your distributors. Share them with your distributor partners, their marketing teams, they'll get them out. Share them with your direct reports. Your direct contacts at retailers. Make sure that these assets include bottle shots, label close-ups, and some beautifully curated lifestyle images so they really get a sense of the message you're trying to convey. Should go say, be no surprise, and should go without saying to use social media. It's free until you need to bump it up, right? Instagram should be your first stop. Everyone is there. It is a place where you can directly connect with distributors and retailers and on-premise buyers alike in one place. Distributors cannot tag specific accounts, but you, the supplier, can. So please do so. Engage them directly. Let them engage you back because they're learning how to figuring out how to work this way as well. So there are many ways, and we're all trying to figure out how to tie the retail and on-premise activity to digital activations as well.
Sarah, and that's sort of your expertise, and I think that's a really good perspective, right? The digital space is the continuum during all of this transition period. So very smart point to invest in that.
There's also more. There's PR opportunities. Seek out PR opportunities. Whether you can, afford to bring on an agency, do anything you can to get your name and your brand out there. Take out ads in industry publications. Focus on distributors and retailers. If you want to hit consumers first, start sponsoring events. Use your own personal network. All of those will engage because with social media and digital marketing tools, we've blurred the lines between consumers, distributors, retailers, and so on.
Yeah, all great stuff. Digital definitely is the way to go, and PR is certainly something that you can help support your boots on the ground sales efforts with. Let's talk now about marketing and sales material, because a lot has evolved, right? As technology has evolved, we've seen the evolution of marketing material, what's best, how we engage folks. When we look at the digitization of materials, Sarah, right in your wheelhouse, and utilizing remote engagement as a necessity. Now, given the state both of on and off premise, and taking into consideration all the challenges that we just spoke about, from labor to supply chain issues, what's effective given all of these changes and uncertainty? So Monique, let's start with you. What are you experiencing?
A few different things. And Sarah, you definitely touched on it. I will say though, just first and foremost, let's get it out there. We all thought the QR code was dead. And it turns out that it's a really, really great tool. And the fact that our phones have reformatted it so that you just, kind of scan something on it. I can't believe how often I have to say, get a QR code on there, take advantage of having this on the label, on your shelf talkers, on pieces that sit in the aisles at stores, on your menus, on whatever it is. I don't think it's going anywhere. So if you haven't already embraced it, there's free resources, you can just go online and kind of like Google it and make it up. But I think that being said, do all of our folks in the on and off premise have a person to do that, or the time to go do that? Do they know how easy it is? Maybe they don't. So you can provide that bridge and that kind of like knowledge base for them to be able to go in and access those things. Additionally, to Sarah's point, Instagram, it's interesting to me that it's almost like not Google or any other service, but there's generationally new drinkers, especially, and would say millennials and kind of everybody. It is like the facts. That's their perception. If I want to know more about this company, their distillers, the maturation, their warehousing, their vineyards, they just go to Instagram. And then, if they can't see the authenticity, they want to see photographs. Who are the people? Give me some videos of when distillation is going on. If it's not there, if the material isn't there, and that's easy for you to create in-house on your iPhone, then it doesn't really seem real. And so I think it's extremely, extremely important to do that. One of the other things, and just kind of a little bit different tack, but one of the things that I have seen that is so fascinating, especially with labor shortages in the on-premise and continued supply chain challenges and increased pricing, just due to inflation, is I see bartenders, bar programs providing resources for free that truly should be paid intellectual property. And just a couple examples actually that I saw today was a fabulous bartender, Jeffrey Morgenthaler, put a syrup calculator out on his Instagram. So if you're in touch with what he's doing and you're able to take that asset as a brand, apply it to some of your products, apply it to some recipes, some suggestions that you're making. A couple of weeks ago, and I don't know what lime prices are doing everywhere else in the country, but they're still crazy here in Chicago. Limes are $150 a case, but you still need all kinds of lime in your cocktails. So here locally, Hospitality 201 put a lime kind of like a way to extract and use every bit of the peels and everything else and really extend the life and the price that you're paying for limes right now. They just put that out there for free. So if you're tuned in to all these influencers and the right things, you can actually be providing cost savings and resources even farther down the line than you would ever expect.
Yeah, two things the pandemic has done: giving second life to QR codes, which I never thought we would see. But then also it was really nice. It brought the mixology community together. And it's so good that they're continuing to support one another and help each other through these times. So that's good to hear, Monique. Thanks for that perspective. John, as a producer supplier, someone who is heavily engaged both on and off presence, but also you just got the live music scene back. That's really big for your brand, right? Tell us more about that.
It is. Well, first, Michael, and thanks. I want to go back to what Monique and Sarah are saying, because first and foremost, the QR codes are big, right? I mean, there's several things, particularly as craft suppliers, right? You're watching every penny. A lot of what QR is now doing used to be done on shelf talkers and bottleneckers, which all add increased costs to our dry goods and therefore finished goods. But more importantly, it clutters up the shelf and it clutters up your branding. So the fact is that we've just gone to adding QR codes to back of our label, and in some cases, for example, with cast strength or store picks, which are specific to retailers in many markets, we'd use a QR code that takes and talks about. You can link it to your website. You can link it to videos, which we've done in-house that are absolutely made for iPhones and other smartphones. So it's important. It's something that ultimately saves us a lot of money. It does get clear messaging, so nothing is missed. You don't have to worry about word counts, et cetera, as long as it's engaging to the consumer. Long ago, most of us digitized our assets. So whether you're sending things via email to distributors, or for that matter, e-com or retail partners, of course, that's a huge help. And then as you grow, you can integrate with the distributor so that their people can pull off a website and download assets as well. But with regard to the last 2 years of the pandemic, from a supplier point of view, our largest hurdle was and still is shipping and trucking backlogs and delays. And some of this is not only moving our dry goods, our wet goods around, finished goods to warehouses, but also scheduling with distributors for pickups and so forth. It's really been tough. And it's caused some out of stocks in a few markets. It does seem to be getting better, but it's something that I think will be with us for at least another 6 months minimum to 18. Also, in the last 24 months, e-com, as we all know, exploded. But now, with inflation at the highest levels it's been in decades, e-com is slowing. But it's an important channel. And so not only is during this environment are the brick and mortar accounts picking up some of that volume, but what we've done at Blacken is we've increased our value added offerings to e-com, because obviously the price is going to be a bit higher, but you're giving the consumer something they can't necessarily get in the store. And for craft suppliers, it's a lot easier to do value added at e-com for lots of different reasons, which we should likely go into in another seminar. We've also seen that during the pandemic, and as the on-premise started coming out of it, we're seeing establishments reducing the amount of SKUs they carry on the back bar. And let's face it, you know, this is to reduce cost, which is a big issue for everyone in the on-premise. And when you combine the fact that there's SKU reductions on the back bar and the many national brand shortages due to supply issues, this really does offer a unique opportunity for quality craft brands to, you know, without supply issues, to gain distribution and trial. A lot of on-premise operators, as they always do, are looking for the best experience. How can I increase my guest experience? And one of the ways of doing that is using, whether it's local or national craft brands that I don't have to worry about supply on, and I can offer my guests something attractive and new. This can let, you know, and let's face it, the holy grail in on-premise is menu placements, right? So, you know, this is an opportunity for all of us, and it's something that we've really heavily focused on. Michael?
That's great, John. It's there is opportunity amongst all of this change. So I think you have to seize it, be smart about it, and laser focus on your execution. Sarah, you're our digital marketing guru. Tell us about digital marketing opportunities.
It's building on what both Monique and John said. 24 months ago, that landscape looked completely different for us. We didn't have a digital marketing team. We didn't have focus. I was told to figure out digital. You know, you're doing digital, go figure it out. And now we're a team of 6 at Allied, which is a single state, but we're growing as our demands grow, including that of e-commerce, which, you know, we had to gather everything and rush it to just try to keep up. And so the past 2 years, we've been knee deep in digital evolution. Stuff like this was coming, right? The pandemic just expedited the establishment or the evolution of these departments at wholesalers around the country. And I think the same can be said with our suppliers. I feel like at the beginning of 2020, many suppliers, especially the local teams, didn't know what digital assets were used for distinctly. They weren't familiar with Salsify, Drizzly, Provi, Reserve Bar, City Hive, and all of those folks that we've gotten to know over the past 2 years. But now suppliers, retailers, everyone alike is embracing them, partnering with them, incorporating these tools and platforms into their programming. So as it pertains to our audience today, my personal experience is actually that some of these younger, more nimble, smaller, more nimble brands, like the members of the Access team, could be furthest ahead in these areas because they've had to, because of the cost and because this is how they get their name out there. So I just say, take advantage of all the opportunities that you can afford to.
Yes, Sarah, thank you for that. That's really interesting and great stuff.
Michael, could I weigh in? Sorry, could I weigh in real quick? I love this. I mean, this conversation, it's really, really exciting. And I do feel like too, because of the low cost, but kind of like, high output, high access to these things, it's kind of been a great equalizer for a lot of our craft and artisanal brands.
Sure.
You don't have to spend as much as like these huge, multi-million, billion-dollar juggernauts to get the same level of exposure. And I don't think it's not just e-com, even in the way that we are interacting with those customers. A lot of us also have access to digital ordering platforms, so I know there's lots going on in that space right now, but like, we at Winebow have added some storefronts, and I know that a lot of other distributors have as well, not to try and take away from the human or interactive experience, but to really be cognizant that maybe people don't always have the time to have these interactive meetings, these one-on-one meetings, or maybe don't even feel safe sometimes still having people in the store or, people in the restaurant, whatever it is. Just adding an additional tool, inexpensive, that like allows you to order within your time frame, allows you to get more information within your time frame. So it's a really, really exciting and doesn't have to be expensive space to be really diving into right now.
So true. That's how some of our more successful members on Access, I think, John, you guys have 21 Seeds, was purely digital. That's how they got their word out there. And 3 years later, they were bought by Diageo. So when you start with what you can, you never know where it goes.
Yeah, and doing it well, right? Execution, 21 Seeds demonstrates that. John, with Sweet Amber, you continue to demonstrate that. Digital marketing, technology being the great equalizer, cost-effective implementation from QR codes to other ways to engage your customer, get them excited before you meet them physically. But there's one thing that you can't replace, and that is the tasting. We've heard a lot about tastings. We know that during the pandemic, during shutdowns, tastings were basically dead. They're now coming back to life, but it's not that simple. And before we go into tastings with some tasting experts, let's talk about the US marketplace. Dale, give us a SipSource snapshot on category growth so we can understand where the growth is, what's driving the consumer palate right now, and where opportunities for engagement and sales rest.
Thank you, Michael. And what a great conversation. And obviously, it does come down to taste. And as we start looking at what's happening with categories that are growing and segments that are really driving growth right now, we do see a convergence of really, I think, two things. And those two things are segments that were popular in the on-premise are bouncing back, right? They were skewed to the on-premise, so we're seeing that come back, and they're getting some disproportionate growth. Mezcal is a very, very good example of that, right? So oriented towards the on-premise. The other element is premium. The consumer does continue to trade up. Early in the pandemic, I think my friend Danny Breger coined a term, insulated versus impacted consumers by this. And that group that was insulated, they have spending money, they have cash, and they're going out there and they're looking for that self-reward and very much going in and moving up and buying more premium products. So when we look at that and you start looking at what's going on across some of these price tiers that are growing, we see bourbon between 25 and 50 doing well, rum over $25, vodka over 25, gin between that $25 and $50 price range, which is really the sweet spot. On the wine side, Sauvignon Blanc, Chardonnay, and Cabernet between $15 and $25. Those are growing very nicely, even though the total Chardonnay and the total Cabernet categories are actually down in total. Then we also do see there's been an explosion of sparkling wine. Champagne has done very, very well and really accented some good growth already. But then there's a couple categories that are kind of going back to where they were, that really transcended the category and just stayed strong all the way through. And the two things that stick out for me on the wine side was Prosecco. Prosecco has just stayed strong month in, month out, has not really wavered off that kind of low double-digit to mid-single-digit growth. And then you've got tequila, and tequila has been an absolute animal. It has just torn through and just continued to grow very, very quickly in on-premise and off-premise, and even so at very, very high price levels. You see here, Reposado tequila right now is growing almost 37%. So we know the prices of Reposado. We know what that looks like. So we're seeing that consumer move up in price. They're continuing to premiumize, buy premium products, and spend very well. And their taste profiles really haven't changed that much. They're still buying the things that they did 2 years ago, but they have moved up. And I think that does offer an opportunity for a lot of these craft producers.
Yeah, Del, this is really exciting data. And if you remember from one of our webinars sometime back, we talked about what goes into a label. You and Danny talked about how mezcal and tequila are being very creative with their labels, their storytelling, their engagement of consumers. And I think if we would have asked any industry veteran if they ever saw mezcal or tequila in this case having such strong growth and connection with consumers, even over vodka and gin, I think we would all be hard pressed to say this is the current state of play. But here it is. So with that said, John, let's go to you. Let's talk about how you're executing tastings right now, both on and off presence, quite frankly, even on the music scene.
Yeah, well, as you stated earlier, live performance music is back, and it's back in a big way. And we're fortunate in the sense that, as most of you know, Blackened is owned by the band Metallica, and Metallica being back on the road are really focusing on concerts and larger concerts because they've been not working, so they're doing larger venues and also a lot of festivals. And so we've been spending most of our resources partnering with them, right? Obviously, for example, there was just a Vegas concert, and we connected with House of Blues, which is also connected with the music scene. And we ran a series of promotions over the weekend. And for one concert that was 70,000 people strong, we wound up selling 86 9-liter cases over a 2-day period. That's not just at the show, but it's also what we do is, in addition to the House of Blues, where we did an official Metallica pre-party, and then we had an official Metallica after party, but we also blitz the on-premise establishments around it. So it's really able to get us a lot of exposure. You know, some of these festivals, which are outdoors and feature multiple bands, you know, they run for 4 days, and over that 4-day period, with the weekend, of course, being the peak, you can attract over 140,000 people. And in those venues, the festivals, we've got, you know, a 60-foot blackened bar, and we've got a blackened, we call it the War Wagon, which is an old truck with blackened barrels on it, where we sample as well as sell a menu of batched craft drinks, and we sell them in a blackened and Metallica logoed souvenir cup. And it's, you know, it really goes well, and the cost isn't at all prohibitive because you're selling most of it. Having said that, though, you know, as Dale just showed with the growth of, particularly in my case, with American whiskey, bourbon, combined with the tequila sections are exploding. You know, consumers walk into an off-premise account and you see a sea. It used to be only vodka that had that whole wall, right? Now you're seeing the tequila section is also a wall, and the American / bourbon rye sections are massive. So regardless of how attractive your bottle is, regardless of how much information is on the bottle, it's still a minefield that people walk into and like, whoa. And I think that's really where tastings are critical, because they're expensive, they're time consuming, all of that is true. But if you're in a category that's exploding as mine is, it really is critical to point out and sample the actual goods. Because what I've learned is, you know, in the old days, people had specific brands. Consumers have always had a repertoire of things they drank. It might be beer before, wine with, cocktails, or aperitifs after. The fact of the matter is people always drank a menu of different spirits. Now there's so much opportunity within one category that they're sampling. I mean, so it's not like someone's walking in to buy Blackened and that's all they buy in American whiskey space. Not true. They're trying different things, much like what happened in the early 90s with single malt Scotch. It was, you know, people were sampling, and therefore you walk into someone's home and you see a back bar that might have 3 or 4 bourbons on it. So sampling, in my view, is critical. Again, it is expensive, but it's really necessary if you're going to stand out and gain awareness. Michael?
Yeah, making the investment, sampling the goods, and getting a return on that is important. And John, you're realizing that. That's very exciting. And Monique, from your perspective, how have tastings changed? And tell us what today's perfect tasting looks like.
Well, it's not virtual. I'll say that for Sarah. Largely the virtual tastings. I think some part of it will persist. I think it makes sense to have it offered. I mean, it's not hard to have a webcam right there when somebody's doing something live. And if someone wants to, you know, imbibe from across the country in the same products, great. Like, no extra cost, no skin off your back. But a couple of different things that I think are a little bit unexpected and have really come from the pandemic, both off and on premise. You know, John, I totally agree with you. The expense is worth it. I mean, if people are going to go in and start doing tastings again, you know, you're typically looking at about $150 to do a 2-hour tasting in one of your retailers. And you can't expect to make that money back right away. That's not, oh, that's the profit off of a couple of cases. It's far down the road that you're probably going to see that return on investment. But the bigger piece to me, and I know just still here in Chicago, we are not doing tastings indoors yet, so you're not seeing tastings in the store aisles. People are still being fairly conservative. So where you have the opportunity is making sure that you're tasting out the store staff, not just the buyer, not just the manager, everybody that you can in the aisles, everybody that works there, the wine team, if you're spirits, the spirits team, if you're wine, get as many people informed and at least going, hey, that Monique came in and she did a little thing the other day and she seemed cool. So this brand must be pretty good, just positively, disposed, like all the way up and down the chain, making sure that people are positively disposed to know the brand. And it's not just, just stuck out there in a sea of brands. So I think making sure to taste out as many people. Additionally, everybody became a home mixologist. So it's not just about the straight spirits. I think you definitely have to make sure that people understand how to use the product. So whether that means that you're maybe merchandising in a creative way, not just your agave spirit, but maybe it's also with an orange liqueur and the other elements that go into a margarita, the most popular cocktail in the country right now. So being a really consultative, salesperson and being able to say, maybe you do sip Blanco tequila neat. I know I do, but most people are going to drink it in the form of a margarita. Let's give them all the tools that they need in one place, recipes, proportions, all of that, and make it really easy and simple because that's probably how they're going to use it. Also, in terms of tastings, I think still very important in the on-premise, but again, has dramatically changed. You maybe don't just have access to the buyer, to the head bartender or mixologist. And again, people drinking cocktails, and John, you said it, they're pairing them with food. It's not just wine pairings with food now, it's cocktails, it's spirits. So we have really started engaging, again, whoever's available, all the way from the bar back to the bartender, the entire wait staff, but also the kitchen staff. Don't miss out on, if you can, engaging the chef, the sous chefs. What do you think of this? Are you into this? How would you pair this with appetizers? The more the merrier. Everybody will be positively disposed to your brand, think you're a good person, know the brand, be able to educate their consumers about it, but recommend many faceted ways of consuming your goods across the bar as well.
Yeah, consultative sales. But also, I think you hit on something really interesting. Connecting with the person that drives the food decisions, like the chef, could help place your cocktail or your spirits or your wine, whatever you're representing, on that same menu and pairing. That's really interesting. Good advice there.
I'll give you an excellent example, Michael. We went to just last night. I have a Japanese partner in town for cherry blossom season. So he was speaking at the embassies and different things. But we went to a newly minted 2 Michelin star last night that is using his Japanese koji fermented whiskey. They're a very koji fermented food program in a food course, in a consomme paired with venison. So we're not going to see those cases move in a cocktail. I mean, we will also see them move in a cocktail. Obviously, that's the hope. But I mean, it's unbelievable. I would not have expected that. And kudos, to my specialist and that sales consultant for thinking to present it in that unique way. But it just took having a conversation with the culinary team about koji. And then they form that bridge, and it's really cool to see it happen.
Yeah, that's an engagement strategy that goes way back from the front of the house to the back of the house, as they say. Sarah, tips for tasting. Tell us more.
Well, I think Monique, I defer to everything that Monique said, everything that John said. As we've discussed, Monique is much more in touch with the on-premise trade these days. But I'll second her that the virtual tasting time is done. QR codes may not have died, but we think virtual tastings. At the beginning of the pandemic, we had slews of them. We had trainings that way. You had to do one-on-one calls. But the reality is, and John, I'll make you an exception here, products that launched during the past 2 years lost out and probably suffered because of that lack of direct connection. Really need all senses to be employed for an ideal experience. And without that, it didn't do the product justice.
Yeah, good point. And I'm glad that things are getting back to normal, because we all know the craft brand startup community needs those opportunities for sure. Dale, let's go ahead and think about everything we just heard from our panel. What does the data show? Because I think we have a group of people right now watching this, and they're saying, I'm ready to get out there, I'm ready to make sales. But given the state of on-premise, Are they really ready to take on new brands, given what they've learned about cost of goods, inventory management, running a lean operation? They're stressed. Tell us about the state. What types of products are best positioned to be placed with on-premise?
Yeah, and I think, it's interesting, and we bring this up, and we're going to talk about data and talk about share changes and things like that. But I do think what I'm hearing from the panelists is everything has changed. And getting back and having that back to basic conversation with every operator. What is your strategy? How are you approaching the market? Because it's likely changed since the last time you talked to them. And the market itself is very dynamic on what's happening. But when we look at things that are growing, and the one thing that I did purposely leave off the previous chart on categories that are growing was pre-mixed cocktails. And pre-mixed cocktails continue to gain share. And you can see on here, tequila has gained the most share. Over the last 2 years, it's gained 2.2 share points. But pre-mixed cocktails are right behind that at 2.1. Then we go to the other end of this and we see that the vodka category has lost 2.3 share points. The other thing that we have to think about that operates outside of this is when I look at Nielsen data of the pre-mixed cocktail category, 58% of the dollars are coming from vodka-based drinks. So we know that some of that, when we start thinking about that, is the switch off. That is certainly the case at the retail side. But even in the on-premise, as operators bring pre-mixed cocktails into their program, that's going to likely impact vodka more than it does everything else. But this continues to tell that story that the consumer is looking for tequila, mezcal. That category continues to drive very, very strongly and is taking share from vodka, rum, most likely a little bit of the gin side. And then I do think that when we look at this, the Irish whiskey category has come back. It was very, very on-premise dominated, did very, very well in the on-premise. And it took a very big hit, but it's now coming back, and that is impacting some of the other whiskey categories. But I would anticipate as we look forward, number one, tequila is going to continue to do extraordinarily well and drive that sale. And then I do think the operator has to figure out how are they going to leverage pre-mixed cocktails to help elevate their to-go service and their delivery service that also isn't going anywhere. So that to me is where how that has changed. And when we start looking at how the category is moving, those are the elements that I would look at.
Yeah, a lot of movement, a lot of opportunity, but also a lot of competition. So John, let's go to you. Tell us about the brands that maybe you're listening and say, yeah, great. I don't have a $10 million marketing budget and a Grammy award-winning band to help promote my label. I have a one-person sales team and my marketing budget is tight. What's the best way for these folks to go about making sales?
And look, there's no easy answer here. I think the first thing is that, if your human resources as well as your financial resources are limited, then you really need to build strength in your own backyard. I mean, meaning you've got to use every opportunity available to you, and it's really your personal circle. They've got to be your brand ambassadors, and you really need to hold off on expanding your geographical footprint until you've got something in your backyard to promote elsewhere. But having said that, I also think that, again, coming out of the pandemic now, building your relationships with distributor salespeople is really very, very key. Because, as we know, this is still a relationship-based business. And if you're not, you need to be in your key and lighthouse accounts on a regular basis. If you don't have people to work with you to do it, you've got to have to do it yourself. I will say, however, and I've said this in previous seminars, is in my opinion now more than ever, and this is my fourth startup. Now more than ever, feet on the street and sufficient funding is really key. I mean, we're past the days where you can just roll the dice. Feet on the street is incredibly important. You are doing the heavy lifting initially. And the more successful you and your team are at doing that, the more successful you're going to be in recruiting a distributor network to build upon your efforts. So I think that there's, a lot of hard work, and it's all people related. Michael?
Yeah, John, thank you for that. That's really interesting. And I think something the Access Group is going to be speaking about in our next meeting is how to maximize local marketing, because that's where the opportunity lies, maximizing your local backyard marketplace first before you expand. And we'll have Brand Muscle, one of our partners, talk about that. So Sarah, you develop brands from startup to well-established. What's your guidance on a lean approach to sales and marketing efforts to complement what John just shared?
Well, thank you. I actually have learned more from those brands that have succeeded from their start on their own to being successful, as well as you learn a lot from the ones that don't take off the same way. I think it really goes back to doing what can be done within your budget, but taking advantage of being everywhere you possibly can be. But be on the places only that fit your brand. That's key. So if it's social media, brand yourself, be on Instagram. If you're targeting young, if you're targeting a different SKU, maybe focus, if you're targeting a little older, focus a little more on Facebook. That kind of thing, those kinds of where you place yourself in publications really helps brand you and speaks to your target consumer. Establish partnerships. Find like-minded brands in complementary categories that are reaching for that same target consumer. You can do giveaways, merchandising, media, all of it. It just increases your exposure. At the same time, you can also pair with complementary industry brands to increase that exposure as well. This can be other spirits or wines. We've done it in-house, but obviously also a natural pairing is with a mixers or glassware or a condiment. The reality is get creative and try everything that fits your brand.
Yeah, great insights. Monique, what can you add to that?
Yeah, I mean, great points from both John and Sarah. I completely agree with everything both of you were saying. You can't always have your eye on grow. What more can I get? What more markets can I get? What more accounts can I get? Don't forget these people haven't seen you in 2 years. And so first and foremost, I say be grateful, get out there, simply say thank you. Even if people can't taste or we're not doing R&D on cocktails or the store doesn't, thank you. Mail a handwritten card, sit and have dinner and a cocktail in that space and say, I know you, I see you. You supported me through the past 2 years and I appreciate it. And I'm not asking you anything else right now, because if you're constantly looking forward and not grateful, then you can't really expand on that lowest hanging fruit, which are the people that were presented and did buy during this time and did support you. And I think just like we look at our portfolios, I'm sure as you look at your sales and market, very often 80% of your sales come from the top 20% of your accounts. So continue to concentrate your efforts in training and education and gratefulness in those spaces on and off premise, because you still have opportunities for growth there. You certainly don't want to look back in 3, 6, 12 months and realize you've lost someone who supported you through a really difficult time because your eyes were on the prize a little bit too far forward. I think too, the kind of traditional work with, like, a lot of those models were broken during COVID. And so we're going to have to be flexible and, just know that moving forward, you might be in market, but everybody's trying to get in market right now. I'm sure, Sarah, we're like kind of losing our minds because all of a sudden everyone from all over the world, needs to be in all of our markets visiting our accounts. So we're still able to give you guidance, as your distributor partner, but you might have to do a few more things on your own than you're used to. So stay organized to make sure that you know where you're going, when you're going, who you saw, and be able to give us follow-ups so that your time in market is not wasted and we're actually getting those case sales and actually closing those loops.
Yeah, it makes complete sense. I think in terms of what everyone's experiencing nationwide, it seems pretty consistent from the East Coast to the West Coast. And for those of you in attendance, we'd love to hear some of the questions you might have for our panel. But it's clear from the brands like Blackened, American Whiskey, to the wholesaler distributors who are working, again, coast to coast. It seems to be that the challenges and opportunities are all about the same, which is odd, because typically you've got some variance, but it seems like everyone seems to be recovering in the same way. But the great news is, according to the data, things are promising, though there are challenges, and in those challenges lie a lot of opportunities if you can find them and execute on them well enough. So in combing through some of the questions, and we do have a lot of questions, it says here, what happens if I only have printed material and haven't had the chance to digitize that material? What's the best way to manage my assets, my marketing assets? Is there a load, 50-50, 70-30? Feel free to jump in, the panel.
I think you use what you have, right? So just like books are not going away, magazines aren't fully going away, newspapers aren't fully going away, tangible still has value. And in store, there's still people going in store. You still need shelf talkers and case cards and posters and other display enhancers. So that's still useful. Just whatever you can share that and digitize what you can going forward.
Yeah. Also, we're getting a lot of questions about QR codes. And when we look at the QR codes, it makes the labels really dynamic and an opportunity to share a story, to share ingredients, to talk to folks and put them right in touch, if you will, with a master distiller. I've seen some really unique applications. I feel like we could do a whole webinar on the implementation of QR codes. But let's dig a little bit deeper. We'll go around robin. Tell us about some of the unique ways you've seen QR codes utilized in the marketplace.
I mean, I'll start. I right at the beginning, for whatever reason, when everybody was having to wait outside the store, well, only a certain number of people were allowed in stores. So you always had a line outside the liquor stores and you had to stay 6 feet apart. You're just standing there with your mask on and you're like, you can't really look people, in the eye, and you can't talk. So I was like, let's make QR codes for different brands that are 6 feet apart. And I think you could still do it in the aisles and things like that, but it could be things that are on sale. It could be more information about stuff. But you see them now on cooler doors, oh, hey, you're going to buy Prosecco. Maybe you should be making a spritz. Like, why don't you head on over to the liqueur aisle and buy a bitter? But it's just, people are always on their phones anyway. They're looking for suggestions. They're looking for more information. I'd say, put them in unusual places. I think sometimes is kind of fun, but also keep the information on there kind of short and sweet. Like, I like to see videos, like John, you were saying, things for even like single barrel and store picks. I mean, if you can condense like somebody doing a store pick down to a 60-second video and that bottle's in your hand, that's a pretty cool kind of personal connection. So yeah, it doesn't have to be expensive, again, just get creative with it, but I keep it short and sweet.
Monique, one thing that I would add there real quick is on your 60-second video, if you can make it a 15-second video, better. Right?
Always, and cheaper too.
Shorter, right? Attention spans are small.
Look, I would add that there are a lot of product innovation out there, and that's increasingly becoming a differentiator. And one of the things that we utilize with Blacken is a sonic enhancement technique, which we call black noise. And it's in a 30-second elevator pitch, it's difficult. So what we've done is we created about I think it's about 26-second animated. It's a cartoon video of the process, and in that short time period, it totally explains what it is. And that's the thing we're starting using amongst others, but that's some of the things we're doing to educate, because it does, people, if they don't understand it and don't know it, they tend to dismiss it.
Yeah. Sarah, digital marketing is obviously in your wheelhouse. When a brand like Blacken executes on something so well and creative that connects with consumers and is digestible, it really does connect and creates a unique experience. That's got to be music to your ears. So when you're speaking to startup and craft brands, what are you encouraging them to do to really stand out and connect and maybe share a similar fate as 21 Seeds?
Yeah, no, I like your pun though. It was definitely music to my ears. And any brand with a rock star behind it, let's go. But I think the reality is what John said, what 21 Seeds did. And what I have hearkened back from our first webinar to now is first you have to know yourself. You truly have to know what your brand is, what you stand for, and therefore everything should come naturally from that. Your, the branding, that how John can pull in the sonic music, I call it black noise, because it all works together between Blackened and Metallica, and you know what they're standing for, who they're speaking to, and kind of the sense, the formality of, or the feelings of the brand you're going to get from it. 21 Seeds did the same thing. And I feel like that is it's just like branding a human. It doesn't necessarily need lots of bells and whistles. It's just got to be authentic and true and broad, as broadly as you could possibly do it without overextending yourself, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, no, I think it does make sense. And I think based upon the feedback we're getting in the chat room, this is all very exciting, informative, and empowering information. We're going to stop here, but we will continue the conversation, I am sure, with many folks here anticipating our next access program. And I will tell you that when we get questions and we speak to a panel of experts and we all share our experiences, it always inspires us and helps us plan out our next webinar. And all of this, again, is knowledge sharing. This is a free resource for our community, for our industry, to help us get back to where we were prior to the pandemic, but certainly based upon the data, based upon the brands, based upon the opportunity. The U.S. alcohol marketplace is really positioned to continue being a global standard, but to be something that is really exciting, very, very inspiring, and most importantly, doing this in a well-regulated marketplace with responsibility top of mind. So as we've always say, we'll make a recording of this webinar available to anyone and everyone who has registered. For those of you who attended live, you now got this information smarter, so you have a competitive advantage by at least 12 hours. We suggest you get out there and exploit that. Be sure to engage WSWA Access Program on social media by using the hashtag WSWA Access. I want to thank everyone who attended. I want to thank our panel of experts who are very eager to get right back to work. And then we also want to thank the WSWA members in attendance, the board of advisors, and then more importantly, I'd like to again congratulate and recognize the WSWA Access class that has just been admitted to the program. We'll be announcing those names, I believe, later next week, but really an exciting group to work with, and we hope to share more. So finally, thank you. Let's continue to keep the U.S. alcohol marketplace the global standard. Thank you to professionals like all of you in attendance who work hard to do that, and you make this really exciting, rewarding, and most of all, for me, very interesting. So thanks, everyone. Have a great day. Be well, and cheers.